Listen, something about this whole situation does not sit right, and the more you look at it, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Because this isn't just about an award, this isn't just about a speech, and this definitely isn't just about one actor winning a gold statue. This is about what happens before the statue, what happens during the humiliation, and what happens after the applause fades. Because according to D.L. Hughley, what happened to Michael B. Jordan wasn't just an award season moment, it looked like a pattern, and once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it.
The only thing white people have lost they have lost the ability to do is to say without consequences. That's it. What else have they lost? Donald Sterling said made $2 billion saying. Well, Joe Rogan said he made $150 million.
Now pause right there, because DL wasn't just randomly ranting. DLL has been in Hollywood for decades. He's watched careers rise, careers fall, people sell their souls for a seat at the table, and he's noticed something very specific. He said he doesn't even value the Oscars like that, and the reason is simple. He believes when powerful people meet behind closed doors, the outcome is already decided, and it's rarely in favor of black people. That's a heavy statement, but then he started bringing receipts, and that's when this stopped sounding like an opinion and started sounding like a pattern. He brought up Will Smith. For years, Will campaigned for that Oscar. Years. Movies, interviews, performances, playing the game, shaking the hand, smiling the smile, doing everything Hollywood expects you to do. And then the one year he finally wins, it happens right after one of the most controversial, uncomfortable, and humiliating moments ever broadcast on live television, when he slapped another black man on that same stage. And that's when DL started asking the question nobody wants to ask out loud. Why does the reward always seem to come after the humiliation? And then he brought up Halle Berry. And this part right here is where things start getting really uncomfortable, because people celebrated that moment like it was progress, like it was history, like it was the door opening. Halle Berry wins Best Actress, becomes the first black woman to ever win that award, gives that emotional speech, and everyone said, this changes everything. But did it? Because Halle herself later admitted she thought that Oscar would bring better roles, more opportunities, more meaningful projects, but instead, what did she get? Catwoman. And then her career slowly drifted into the background, straight to streaming movies, smaller roles, less visibility. So the question becomes, was that Oscar a reward, or was it the peak before the fall? And here's the part that really hits hard. More than 2 decades later, Halle Berry is still the only black woman to ever win Best Actress in a leading role. Think about that. 1 in over 90 years. That's not a coincidence. That's not random. That's a system. And then Lupita Nyong'o wins an Oscar for 12 Years a Slave, and suddenly the roles she gets offered afterwards are more slave roles. That's when people started whispering something nobody wanted to say too loudly, that sometimes the award doesn't change your position, it locks you into the position they awarded you for.
Delroy and I are delighted to be presenting the first BAFTA of the night for a vital part of movie making. We're here to
So by the time we get to Michael B. Jordan, Dale Hughley is no longer looking at isolated moments. He's looking at a timeline, a pattern, a sequence. And then something happens at the BAFTAs that makes everything even more uncomfortable. Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo are on stage presenting. A big moment, international audience, huge platform, and suddenly a man in the audience shouts the N-word. Just like that. In the middle of the ceremony, in the middle of their moment, in front of the world.
Thank my incredible cast. Wumi, thank you so much for giving Smoke opportunity to be here.
Now, yes, the man had Tourette syndrome. And yes, people say it was a coincidence. But here's where things get strange. The BAFTAs were pre-recorded. There was a delay. The BBC had time to edit things out. They edited other things out. But that moment, that word, that humiliation, they left it in. And that's where people started asking questions nobody in the industry wanted to answer. Because if that slur had been directed at another group, would it have aired, or would it have been cut immediately? So now you have 2 black actors standing on stage being publicly humiliated, and the network chooses to broadcast it to millions of people around the world. And after the incident, according to Delroy Lindo, nobody from BAFTA even came to speak to them about it. No apology, no conversation, nothing. And Michael B. Jordan Jordan? He said nothing publicly. He stayed quiet. He moved on. And then just weeks later, he wins an Oscar. And this is the part D.L. Hughley calls the humiliation ritual. First comes the public embarrassment. Then comes the reward. And the unspoken question behind the reward is, can you take it and still smile? Can you be humiliated and still say thank you? Can you be quiet and still be rewarded? Because if you look at Hollywood history, the pattern starts to look less like coincidence and more like a test of how far you're willing to go, how much you're willing to tolerate, how silent you're willing to stay. Because Hollywood doesn't just reward talent, Hollywood rewards cooperation. Hollywood rewards people who don't make the room uncomfortable, people who don't speak too loudly, people who don't challenge the system that feeds them. And that's why some people say Michael B. Jordan is considered safe. Not safe as in boring, safe as in predictable. Safe as in he won't disrupt the machine. Safe as in he won't say something that costs studios money. Safe as in he'll carry the franchise, do the press, smile for the cameras, and never make the executives nervous. And in Hollywood, being safe can be more valuable than being talented. So when Dale Hughley said, whenever powerful people meet in secret, the results aren't going to be good for black people, he wasn't just talking about one award. He was talking about the entire system. And whether you agree with him or not, one thing is very hard to ignore. The pattern he's pointing at has been repeating itself for decades. And once you start looking at this Michael B. Jordan Oscar through that lens, it stops looking like a simple win. It starts looking like a trade. Because once you start seeing it as a trade, everything starts to look different. The award doesn't just look like recognition anymore. It starts to look like compensation, like a transaction, like something was taken and then something was given. And the uncomfortable question sitting in the middle of all of this is simple. What exactly was the price? Dale Hughley wasn't saying Michael B. Jordan didn't deserve success. That's not what this was about. This was about the system, the machine, the same machine that has been operating since the very beginning of Hollywood. And if you go all the way back, the pattern was already there, hiding in plain sight. Hattie McDaniel, 1940. First black person to ever win an Oscar. History, right? A huge moment. But what role did she win for? Playing a maid in Gone with the Wind. And on the night she won, she wasn't even allowed to sit with her white co-stars. She had to sit at a segregated table in the back of the room. Imagine that. You win the biggest award in Hollywood, and you still can't sit in the same room as the people you worked with. So even in her biggest moment, she was still being reminded where the line was. And it didn't stop there. When she died, she wanted to be buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery. They refused because the cemetery was segregated. Even in death, the system didn't make space for her. And for decades, she didn't even have a proper marker there. So when people say, why make everything about race? It's because the history is right there, written into the foundation of the industry. And that's why Dale Hughley keeps saying this isn't about individuals, it's about patterns. Because Hollywood has always been comfortable rewarding black actors for roles that fit a certain narrative. The slave, the maid, the victim, the tragic figure, the side character in someone else's story. But when it comes to black directors, black producers, black people controlling the story, the money, and the narrative, that's where the wins almost disappear. Think about this for a second. In the entire history of the Academy Awards, for decades and decades, not a single black director won Best Director. Not one. John Singleton got nominated, didn't win. Lee Daniels got nominated, didn't win. Steve McQueen got nominated, didn't win Best Director. Barry Jenkins got nominated, lost. Spike Lee, one of the most influential filmmakers ever, didn't even get nominated until decades into his career. That's not a talent issue, that's a control issue. Because acting is performing in someone else's vision. Directing is controlling the vision. And controlling the vision means controlling the story. And controlling the story means controlling how history is told, how people are portrayed, who looks like the hero, and who looks like the lesson. So when Dale Hughley talks about this humiliation ritual, he's not just talking about one moment at the BAFTAs. He's talking about an industry that historically rewards you when you fit into the story they want to tell, but not when you try to tell your own story. And this is where the Michael B. Jordan situation becomes even more complicated, because Michael isn't just an actor. He's a producer now. He's building his own projects. He's gaining power. And that's when Hollywood usually starts paying very close attention to you, not just as talent, but as a potential power player. And the BAFTAs incident, whether coincidence or not, put him in a very specific position, because the world was watching to see what he would do. Would he speak out? Would he call it out? Would he embarrass the institution? Or would he stay quiet, smile, and move forward? He stayed quiet, and then he wins an Oscar. Now again, some people will say that's reading too much into it. Some people will say an award is just an award. But D.L. Hughley is looking at the sequence, not just the outcome. The humiliation, the silence, the reward, the pattern. And then there's another layer to this that people don't talk about enough. The idea of being acceptable. Not too angry, not too political, not too outspoken, not too controversial. Hollywood loves talented people, but Hollywood really loves talented people who don't make executives nervous. There's a reason that for years certain actors get labeled difficult, hard to work with, or not marketable the moment they start speaking too loudly about certain issues. And there's a reason other actors keep getting franchise after franchise after franchise. It's not always just about box office. It's about predictability. It's about control. It's about knowing this person will not disrupt the machine. And some fans even compared Michael B. Jordan to something Michael Jordan said back in the 90s when he refused to publicly support a black political candidate and said, "Republicans buy sneakers too." In other words, don't upset the customers. Don't upset the buyers. Don't upset the system that signs the checks. And when you look at Hollywood like a business instead of an art form, everything starts to make a lot more sense. Awards become marketing. Moments become narratives. Narratives become control. And control is the real currency in Hollywood, not the gold statue. So when Dale Hughley says black people shouldn't beg to be accepted, what he's really saying is this: if the system only rewards you when you stay quiet, smile through disrespect, and play roles that don't threaten the power structure, then is the reward really acceptance, or is it approval for obedience? That's the uncomfortable question sitting underneath this entire conversation. And it definitely didn't end with that Oscar. Because if history tells us anything, it's that, in Hollywood, the story you see on the screen is only half the story. The other half is the one nobody wants to talk about.